and raising in this scenario actually lights a lot of money on fire. Now you may say, why in the world would Doug Polk raise here? Well, I was actually commentating this game live, and I was pretty shocked by this one. I assumed Doug Polk just must know something about the GTO solver that I did not. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerCoaching.com, and today we have another hand from the 200-400 High Stakes Feud between Daniel Negreanu and Doug Polk. They are playing the Cadillac of Hold'em, of poker, no limit, Texas variety. Here we are playing Daniel Negreanu on the button with King 7 offsuit. He raises it up, perfectly fine, and Doug Polk calls with 10-7 offsuit. You may say, is 10-7 too weak to call? Well, no, it's not. We actually have GTO preflop charts available for you completely for free. Check those out at pokercoaching.com/HUNL. You have no excuse for playing poorly. Before the flop, we have all the charts you need available at pokercoaching.com in the tools section. So make sure you get those. Flop comes ace, 4, 2. Doug Polk checks, and Daniel Negreanu elects to check behind. Let's take a look at the GTO strategy that Negreanu should be using in this spot. Holy moly, what a mess. Am I right? So in this scenario, notice the solver recommends having two bet sizes, a 70% pot bet and a tiny 20% pot bet. Okay? Let's go through and take a look at the hands that are usually opting to bet big. You see a lot of hands like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10. These hands are all betting pretty big. Ace 4, right? That's a hand that's betting pretty big. Some bottom pair hands. King 4, Queen 4, 4-3, right? Notice that hand has a gut shot. We also see a hand like 5-3 often betting big, because when you have 5-3, it's pretty easy for your opponent to have an ace that will pay a big bet, right? And then in terms of bluffs, you see a lot of these really junky hands like 8-7 offsuit, 8-6 offsuit. You also see pocket 6s and pocket 5s being used as a big bet. Pocket 5s has a gut shot and really doesn't mind if your opponent folds out a hand like King Queen, right? Or Jack 10 even, because those hands all have decent equity, and if they just bet the turn and the river, pocket 5s often has to find a fold, right? Also 5s has a gut shot. 6s is a hand that can also use a bigger bet size. We see 7s doing it occasionally, but then we see the hands that mostly use a small bet size are the more like thin value type hands, something like, you know, ace jack and worse. We also see stuff like king highs going for a small bet because they're likely the best hand, and if your opponent folds, that's fantastic. We also see a smattering of bluffs using the small sizes as well. So this is where poker is already quite difficult because, as you see, all of the options are available with every hand, right? I mean, there are a few hands that are opting to like bet every single time, like these small pairs and pocket aces for the most part, but like every other hand, yes, we have two pair and these hands betting every time, but every other hand besides those are really mixing up their strategies a ton. I mean, just looking through this, there's almost no hand that's doing everything 100% of the time here. And this is why trying to play the GTO strategy is very, very, very difficult for us mere humans. It does go check, check on the flop, though, and this King 7 actually does opt to check a very, very good amount of the time. So fine play by Negreanu here. Turn is the 5 of diamonds, so now a 3 is a straight. Both players have a flush draw. And Doug Polk elects to go for a bet. How do we feel about this? Well, it's actually fine. Doug Polk can use various sizes in this scenario. He certainly can use a bigger size. If we take a look at the GTO solution here, it doesn't really tell us exactly how I was playing these 10-7s, but these 10-7s with a diamond often either bet small or big, and often it is using the bigger size, so this is a hand that does make some sense to bluff. You may say, why in the world would you want to bet with a hand like 10-7 here? Because if your opponent has king high, or queen high, or, you know, random jack high, they're going to fold. And if we go back to Negreanu's flop checking range, notice there's a whole lot of hands, like queen high. There's some king highs down here, right? There's some jack highs. All of these are going to fold if you do bet. And the nice thing about betting here is if Negreanu does have a hand, like let's say 9-4, right? If he does have 9-4 and the river does not help him, he's probably gonna end up folding out that 9-4 on the river, right? So this is a pretty reasonable hand to bet the turn and bet the river when you miss, okay? On around to Negreanu, you see with King 7 here, when he has a diamond, he basically always calls. When he doesn't have a diamond, he basically always folds. It is worth noting, some, pretty weak hands are calling this bet. Like notice any 5 is calling. Notice any 4 is calling. By the way, someone asked me the colors, what these represent. Green on this chart is call, blue is fold, red is raise. Okay, gray means not in your range at this point because he played it differently. Probably should have stated that in the very first video I did like this, huh? That's okay. All right. As you note here, almost no raising on this turn when you're facing a lead. And if you ask, well, it's not really a lead because it went check, check. When you're facing this turn bet, you may say, why are we not raising very often here? It's because we don't actually have all that many 3s, right? We have some, but not all that many. And that's because if we go back to the flop, notice a lot of these 3s just opted to bet immediately. And we don't have a lot of the weak offsuit 3s. Whereas if you look at Doug Polk's range, he has all of these 3s, right? And they're all betting. So in this scenario, when he has a lot of these 3s in his range, and he's betting the majority of them, the player in position here just doesn't get to raise all that often because you would be raising into a pretty strong range. And you don't want to be raising into a pretty strong range. So with the nut flush draw here, it's just a very, very easy call. River gives Doug Polk a pair, but more importantly, a 7-high flush. And Negreanu has the king high flush. Okay? Did I say 10-high flush? Man, it's the weekend. On weekends, I take care of kids. My brain barely functions. Thank you for sticking with me. Polk has a 7-high flush here. Okay. Polk goes for a small bet. Interesting spot. Interesting spot. This is a scenario where if we look at Doug Polk's river strategy, we do actually see hands like 10-7, these have diamonds, mostly going for a small bet. You may say, isn't that pretty thin? And it is a little bit thin. The thing is, though, is that Negreanu is going to have a whole lot of one-pair type hands here and a whole lot of, some weaker flushes, right? Not a ton of them, but some. And those hands are going to feel very inclined to call this small bet. You have to realize when Doug Polk bets so tiny, Negreanu actually does need to call a pretty good chunk of the time. And that's going to result in him calling with many, many inferior hands. If Doug Polk did check this and Negreanu bets, Doug Polk's definitely going to call. He's not going to do anything else. So around to Negreanu, it may look like he has the nuts, but he actually doesn't. Notice he loses to the 3-2 of diamonds. Okay? So in this scenario, even when you lose to a hand or 2, you should still put in the raise because here it's very easy for Doug Polk to have queen of diamonds, right? If we take a look at this, we see random queen of diamonds, all of these over here, mostly betting, right? He could have the jack of diamonds, mostly betting. He could have 10 of diamonds, mostly betting. He could have 9 of diamonds, mostly betting, right? So you see he has all of these hands that quite often are betting. So this is a spot where Negreanu definitely needs to raise. Take a look at this. As we see, it's kind of difficult to tell exactly what the kings are doing, but basically all of these kings here are raising if they have the king of diamonds. If they have the 7 of diamonds, you see that's calling, but the king of diamonds is virtually always raising in the spot because the king of diamonds is the effective nuts. It's not the actual nuts, but it's the effective nuts, and that's good enough. Other hands Negreanu is raising here. Notice he can even raise some queen of diamonds here over a small bet because if we look at Doug Polk's river betting range, notice here that Doug Polk actually does check some king of diamonds, which is kind of neat. And when he does bet, he's often using a somewhat big bet size. But if you look at a lot of these hands that are betting, it's some straights that are value betting. It's some random random flushes that are betting. Also, like lower flushes, right? So the queen of diamonds here is actually pretty good. And queen of diamonds does actually opt to raise. We see even the jack of diamonds sometimes opting to raise, which is kind of cool. A lot of people are never raising in this spot unless they have exactly the king of diamonds, and that's probably a bit of a leak when your opponent does use a small bet size, because this small bet size from Doug Polk often indicates a pretty marginal-ish made hand. All right, back around to Doug Polk. He has the 7 of diamonds. What should he do? Well, we see here 10-7 does a whole lot of calling. 9-7 does a whole lot of calling. Jack 7 does a whole lot of calling. In this scenario, when comparing the EV of raising, which is, spoiler alert, what Doug Polk actually does, to calling, this is a pretty big mistake. He actually loses 8% of the size of the total pot here, which is a lot of big blinds. And raising in this scenario actually lights a lot of money on fire. Now you may say, why in the world would Doug Polk raise here? Well, I was actually commentating this game live, and I was pretty shocked by this one. I assumed Doug Polk just must know something about the GTO solver that I did not. I am, far from a world-class heads-up player, but I'm trying to think here, like, what hands do I actually want to be bluffing with? Like, I don't even know if you think about it, right? Like, look, we see he's raising all the king X, right? That's pretty clear. We see he's raising some queen X, but not really. He's just calling the majority of those. So really, he's raising a whole lot of king X. And then he's using sporadic straights and nothing as bluffs, which is kind of neat, but it's like just sporadic total airballs that have random pairs. So like really, I was trying to think like what blockers even matter here. Looks like none of them really matter here. But it does, if you take a look at this, he's really just raising a whole lot of kings, right? That's the vast majority of his raising range. So this is a hand that, as we see, 10-7 here, basically always calls, and raising is probably a pretty big mistake. However, he decides to raise back around to Negreanu. Interesting spot because he has the king high flush, but like we alluded to, he doesn't actually have the nuts because he loses to 3-2 of diamonds. So take a second, ask yourself, if you're sitting here with the king high flush, what should we do playing very deep stacked in this scenario when someone bets the river, we raise them, they re-raise us? What do we do? Should we fold? It's probably not the right answer. Should we call? Should we re-raise small or should we re-raise gigantic? Take a second, pause the video, and type your answer in the comments below. Committing to this situation and really saying what you would do in the spot will go a long way to helping you be more invested in this scenario, and also that's going to make this learning process stick in your mind a little bit better, which is going to make you substantially better at poker in the long run. At pokercoaching.com, my training site, I actually have loads and loads of interactive quizzes, kind of like this, where you have to commit to the answer and then you get immediate feedback so that you are improving in real time. Whenever a lot of people watch training videos at a lot of training sites, they sit back, have a beer, relax, watch Netflix, chill on the side, they hang out and do whatever they want. But if you are actually in there studying and getting immediate feedback in real time, you're going to improve substantially. You can actually get a free trial membership at pokercoaching.com at pokercoaching.com/free. Okay, anyway, are you back? Did you type the answer below? This is a spot where Negreanu opted to call. And I remember sitting here in game thinking, that's probably not so bad, but I would probably just re-raise because, 3-2 suited is very, very unlikely. A lot of people think in this scenario, will a queen really call if you re-raise? And maybe Doug Polk does, maybe Doug Polk doesn't, but Doug Polk's kind of proven that he's a little bit call happy in scenarios. Just purely based on minimum defense frequency, like a good GTO bot would be. But he also knows Negreanu probably isn't getting overly elaborate in this spot with his bluffs, so I'm not actually sure if he calls with the queen of diamonds. This analysis here, though, that I'm about to give you assumes he is playing the perfect GTO strategy. And we see here, the perfect GTO strategy for Negreanu in this scenario is actually to re-raise tiny. And you may say, why in the world would you want to re-raise tiny? That's because the king is essentially the super nuts here, and you want to give Polk plenty of room to make some sort of error. Whenever you click it back minimum, which is basically what Solver recommends, you put your opponent in this nasty spot where they have to defend, or they should defend a decent amount of the time, which is pretty nasty. Let's take a look at what the click back range is. It's basically all the king high flushes, right? And then a few sporadic bluffs. We see Jack 6 offsuit, 9-6 offsuit, 7-4 offsuit, and then random hands down here sporadically clicking it back as a bluff just to balance out the value range. Again, as you see, we're working with all very low frequencies here. This is where it is very, very difficult to actually replicate the GTO solver, but it's pretty clear in this spot that we are re-raising all of our king high of diamonds. And calling here is actually a pretty big mistake. I'm sorry, calling's a big mistake, raising would not be. So this call from Negreanu actually does cost him a decent amount of money compared to the GTO strategy. However, I'm not actually sure he wants to play GTO here because, like I said, I'm not entirely sure Doug Polk's going to pay him because even though, like I said, Doug Polk is a little bit call happy, when it goes bet, raise, re-raise, like, is he really calling here with the queen of diamonds or jack of diamonds or whatever he's using as bluffs that somehow are getting okay odds against a small raise? I'm not sure. I'm not sure he is. So even though Negreanu made a mistake according to GTO by just calling here, I think it's actually probably a bigger mistake in general than Doug Polk's bet river, which was fine, but then re-raise whenever he gets raised by Negreanu, who's probably not getting all that out of line to begin with. Like right here, I have to presume Doug Polk's trying to get Negreanu to fold out the jack of diamonds, the 10 of diamonds, or the 10's on the board, jack of diamonds, 9 of diamonds, 8 of diamonds. But like, is Negreanu even raising that to begin with? I'm not entirely sure. You may say, doesn't Negreanu have to worry about running into the straight flush when he raises minimum with his king high flush? And the answer is actually no. You may say, why? Well, let's go back over here to Polk's turn strategy. This is very important. If both players are playing perfect GTO poker, in this scenario, notice the 3-2 suited of diamonds always is betting big. I went through and took a look at this, and the 3-2 suited always uses a big bet size on the turn. So that means when Polk uses a small bet size on the turn, like he did, let's go back to the turn here. Remember, Polk bets small on the turn. When he bets small on the turn, if he's playing the perfect GTO strategy, he doesn't actually have 3-2 of diamonds, right? Then on the river, we see Doug Polk still does bet some 3-2 suiteds, but these 3-2 suiteds are actually all hands with no diamond. They're the straights going for very thin value, right? And so whenever Negreanu raises, we see here the 3-2 suiteds all fold. And you may say, what about the straight flushes? There are no straight flushes, right? Because on the turn, if Doug Polk is playing the perfect GTO strategy, they would have bet big. We see here a small bet size is rarely used with this 3-2 suited, and when it is, it's 3-2 suited with no diamond. So that is how the solver gets away with always re-raising, bet, raise, re-raising on the river with the King X of diamonds. So pretty cool spot where both players made errors on the river, according to the GTO strategy. That said, when you get in these weird corner cases on the river, GTO sometimes goes far out the window, especially if your opponent is not playing anywhere near the GTO strategy. That's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click the like button, click the subscribe button. I would appreciate that. That helps the YouTube overlords know that you like my work. And if you don't like my work, well, you don't have to come back. It's okay. I will not be offended. You'll find someone out there who makes you happy. Anyway, have a great day, enjoy yourself, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.